The grocery store's fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Marcus stood in the cereal aisle, his 7-year-old daughter Emma tugging at his sleeve. He was tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from working 2 jobs and still wondering if you're doing enough. His wife had left them 3 years ago, and every day since had been a battle to prove he could be both mother and father to his little girl. But tonight, as he reached for the off-brand cornflakes because that's all his budget allowed, he had no idea that a woman in torn clothes and her hungry son were about to teach him the most profound lesson about wealth he'd ever learn. The rain had been relentless all evening, turning the parking lot into a maze of puddles that reflected the neon signs of the shopping plaza. Marcus noticed her the moment she walked through the automatic doors, a woman who looked to be in her early 30s, her jacket ripped at the shoulder, her jeans frayed and stained with what looked like mud. She held the hand of a boy who couldn't have been more than 5, his shoes so worn that Marcus could see his small toes peeking through the fabric. Emma noticed them too. "Daddy, that lady's clothes are broken," she whispered, not with judgment but with the innocent concern children possess before the world teaches them to look away. Marcus gently squeezed his daughter's hand. "Some people are going through hard times, sweetheart. We don't stare." But he couldn't help watching from the corner of his eye as the woman and her son moved through the store. She wasn't shopping the way most people did, casually tossing items into a cart. Instead, she moved with purpose, picking up canned goods, checking prices, then carefully placing most items back on the shelves. The little boy stayed close to her side, his eyes wide and watchful, never asking for anything despite passing displays of candy and toys that would make any child stop and beg. Marcus continued his own shopping, grabbing bread, milk, and the ingredients for the spaghetti he'd promised Emma for dinner. They were rounding the corner toward the checkout when he heard a crash, followed by the sound of someone crying. He rushed toward the commotion and found the woman on her knees, surrounded by shattered glass and soup pooling across the floor. Her son stood frozen beside her, tears streaming down his face. A store employee was already approaching, his expression more annoyed than concerned. "Ma'am, you're going to have to pay for that," the employee said, his voice sharp. The woman looked up, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten, not just embarrassment, but a profound weariness that spoke of countless disappointments. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It slipped from my hands. I'll pay for it, I promise. She opened her wallet, and Marcus could see it was nearly empty, a few crumpled dollar bills and some change. "I need to get my manager," the employee said, already turning away. "Wait." The word came out of Marcus's mouth before he could think about it. He stepped forward, pulling out his own wallet. "I'll cover it." "How much?" The employee paused, calculating. The can was $3.49. Marcus handed him a $5 bill. "Keep the change. And someone should probably clean this up before another customer gets hurt." The woman looked up at him with such surprise that it nearly broke his heart. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "I can. It's already done," Marcus said with a gentle smile. "Accidents happen." As the employee walked away, muttering under his breath, Marcus helped the woman to her feet. Her hands were shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what that means. Are you okay?" he asked, genuinely concerned. "You're not hurt, are you?" She shook her head, brushing at her eyes. Her son had stopped crying but was still clinging to her leg, his small face buried in the torn fabric of her jeans. Emma, who had been standing quietly beside her father, suddenly spoke up. "Are you hungry?" she asked the little boy. "My daddy makes really good spaghetti. He always makes too much." The woman's face flushed. "Oh no, sweetheart, that's very kind, but we couldn't." "Actually," Marcus interrupted, making a decision that felt more right than anything had in a long time, "we'd love to have you both over for dinner. No pressure, but it's pouring outside, and I really do make too much food. My daughter's not exaggerating about that." The woman studied his face, searching for something, pity, perhaps, or ulterior motives. But Marcus kept his expression open and genuine. He wasn't sure what made him extend the invitation. Maybe it was the way she held her son's hand with such fierce protection. Maybe it was the recognition of someone fighting a battle that others couldn't see. Or maybe it was simply that Emma's innocent kindness had reminded him of who he wanted to be. "I'm Marcus," he said, extending his hand. "This is Emma." The woman hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. "I'm Sarah." This is my son, Daniel. That dinner changed everything. Over plates of spaghetti and garlic bread at Marcus's modest apartment, Sarah's story emerged in fragments. She'd left an abusive marriage 6 months ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and her son. She'd been staying at a shelter, working 2 cleaning jobs during hours when Daniel could stay in the shelter's childcare program. The torn clothes weren't from neglect, they were from moving furniture at one of her jobs that day, trying to earn a few extra dollars. But what struck Marcus most wasn't the hardship she'd endured, it was her spirit. Despite everything, Sarah spoke about her plans for the future with determination. She talked about the GED classes she was taking at night, the medical assistant program she hoped to start once she saved enough. She never once complained or asked for sympathy. And the way she looked at Daniel, with such pure love and hope, reminded Marcus why he fought so hard every day for Emma. "You're an amazing mom," Marcus found himself saying as they cleared the dishes. "Daniel's lucky to have you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't feel amazing most days. I feel like I'm barely holding everything together." "That's what amazing looks like," Marcus replied quietly. "Barely holding it together but never letting go. That's the hard part. That's the part that counts." Over the following weeks, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Sarah and Daniel. He learned that Emma had made Daniel a card at school, insisting they deliver it to the shelter. When they arrived, Marcus discovered that Sarah's hours had been cut at one of her jobs, and she was struggling to afford even basic necessities. He wanted to help, but he was careful not to offend her pride. So he approached it differently. He mentioned that his building had a unit opening up, smaller than his, but the landlord owed him a favor and would give a discount for someone he recommended. He offered Sarah a job helping him with bookkeeping for his weekend landscaping business, work she could do from home while Daniel played with Emma. He didn't make it charity, he made it opportunity. Sarah was hesitant at first, suspicious of kindness after years of betrayal. But slowly, she began to trust. She took the apartment. She accepted the bookkeeping job and proved to be meticulous and reliable. Marcus helped her enroll Daniel in Emma's school. Sarah connected Marcus with resources at the shelter that helped him with childcare costs he'd been struggling with. They began to build something neither had expected, a friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. 6 months later, Marcus sat in the audience as Sarah walked across a stage to receive her GED. Daniel was on his lap, and Emma sat beside him, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Sarah's face was radiant, her new clothes clean and carefully pressed, purchased from her own paycheck. When she looked out into the audience and found them, her smile could have lit the entire auditorium. After the ceremony, as they celebrated with pizza, Sarah pulled Marcus aside. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That day in the grocery store, when you helped me, I was at my lowest point. I'd spent the whole day wondering if Daniel would be better off without me, if I was just dragging him down. I'd decided that night would be our last meal from a store. After that, I was going to take us back to my husband, back to that nightmare, because at least he had money for food." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Sarah, let me finish," she said, touching his arm gently. "You didn't just buy a can of soup that night. You didn't just invite us to dinner. You saw me, really saw me, not as a charity case or a problem to be fixed, but as a person with dignity and worth. You saw my heart when all I could see was my torn clothes and empty wallet. You gave me hope when I had none left. You saved our lives, Marcus. Not with money or pity, but with kindness and belief." Marcus pulled her into a hug, this woman who had become one of his closest friends. "You saved mine too," he whispered. "You and Daniel reminded me what strength really looks like. You reminded me why we keep fighting, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." As they returned to the celebration, watching their children laugh together over silly jokes and too much soda, Marcus realized something profound. He'd spent 3 years believing he was barely surviving, just holding on by his fingernails. But the truth was different. He'd been living all along, living with purpose, with love, with the kind of quiet courage that shows up every single day even when no one's watching. And Sarah, the woman who'd walked into that grocery store in torn clothes, hungry and desperate. She'd been rich all along in the ways that mattered most. She'd had a beautiful heart, one that loved fiercely, hoped relentlessly, and refused to give up even in the darkest moments. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. Sometimes the people who look like they need saving are actually the ones who save us. And sometimes, kindness isn't about having more to give, it's about seeing the worth in someone when the whole world has taught them they're worthless. In a grocery store on a rainy evening, two struggling parents found each other. And in finding each other, they discovered they'd never been as poor as they thought, or as alone. They'd been carrying wealth all along, in hearts that still knew how to hope, to fight, and most importantly, to see the beauty in others that the world had overlooked. That's the kind of richness that changes everything.